I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. So with that prayer, there's an incredible amount of things to think about there. It's almost like everything is in there. In the Tibetan it starts off with Buddha, Sangye, so you have the whole idea of like learning about and meditating on what that means, what Buddhahood means, how you achieve enlightenment, right there in those two syllables, that word. And in the English it begins with I take refuge, I go for refuge, I take refuge. So the nature of that I, so I, self, person, being, these are all different ways of referring to the same thing. So, in other words, then, so conventionally there is a self, just we know conventionally we exist. So conventionally there's an I, conventionally there's a self, and so on. And yet, in Buddhism, what Buddha was quite famous for was teaching no self, selflessness, no self. And when he taught no self, what he meant was not there's no self at all, but the self which is contemporary, contemporary, Indian masters had this idea of a self which is unchanging, which is somehow single, not being made up of parts. Like when we talk about our aggregates, 5 aggregates, so there's 5 of them, but so they're made up of parts, but it's somehow an I, which is just this one single thing, independent of the aggregate. So the Buddha taught there's no such self. So that's why we have this idea that in Buddhism there's no self, but of course actually conventionally there is. There's just no self which has been like fantasized by certain beings, human beings for the most part, I suppose. Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, that I does exist. The I, it conventionally does exist, and that's a whole big thing as well. What does it mean to say that I conventionally exists? Anyway, so then if we can go on with the that stage of the path, the foundation of all good qualities, please. The foundation of all good qualities is kind and perfect Guru. Correctly following the Guru is the root of the path. Am I clearly seeing this and applying great effort? Please bless me to rely upon the Guru with great respect. When I have discovered that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is extremely difficult to find again, and is greatly meaningful, please bless me to unceasingly generate the mind taking its essence day and night. This body and life are changing like a water bubble. Remember how quickly they perish and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. When I have found definite conviction in this. Please bless me always to be conscientious in abandoning even the slightest collection of downfall, of shortcomings, and in accomplishing all virtuous deeds. When I have recognized the shortcomings of samsaric perfections, there is no satisfaction in enjoying them. They are the door to all suffering, and they cannot be trusted. Please bless me to generate a strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Through my being led by this pure thought with great remembrance, alertness, and conscientiousness, please bless me to make keeping the individual liberation vows, the root of the teachings, my essential practice. Just as I have fallen into the ocean of samsara, so have all mother transmigratory beings. By my seeing this, please bless me to train in supreme bodhicitta, which bears the responsibility of freeing transmigratory beings. Even if I develop only bodhicitta without familiarizing myself with the three types of morality, I cannot achieve enlightenment. By my seeing this well, please bless me to keep the vow of the sons of victorious ones with fervent effort. By my having pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to quickly generate within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. When I become a suitable vessel by training in the common path, please bless me to immediately enter the holy gateway of the fortunate beings, the supreme of all vehicles, the Vajrayana. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the two attainments is keeping my vows and samaya purely. When I have gained effortless conviction in this, please bless me to protect them even at the cost of my life. Then when I have realized exactly the vital points of the two stages, the essence of the tantric sects, and am enjoying the yoga of 4 sessions with effort without being distracted by non-meditation objects, please bless me to accomplish these according to the teachings of the holy beings. Thus may the virtuous friends who reveal the noble path and the spiritual practitioners who correctly accomplish it have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely the collections of outer and inner obstacles. In all my lives, never separated from perfect gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma, and by completing the qualities of the grounds and paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. There is one verse which the Buddha taught. I've heard some people say there's some doubt about that, but anyway, Judge Rinpoche, when he was teaching at Nalanda, not Nalanda, LMB a few years ago, he mentioned it's actually taught by the Buddha. So I think it's nice to know this verse because it sort of summarizes some important things about the 4 truths. So this verse says that it says the munis, so it means the Buddhas. The Buddhas can't wash away one's sort of negativities. Your negative karma, your bad karma. You create this bad karma, and so we have this kind of like going on for many past lifetimes. Destructive actions that leave the imprints, which eventually unless we purify, then they're going to bring suffering as a result to us sooner or later. So the Buddhas can't get rid of that for us simply by washing it away. Also, they can't take away the suffering of the transmigratory beings, which means sentient beings. Like just pulling a thorn out of your hand. They can't just grab hold of it and take it. Actually, sometimes the question comes up, what's the difference between transmigratory beings, which sometimes are called migratory beings? I think I used to say transmigratory beings, and sentient beings. So I've always thought they're the same, and in fact they're the same. So in other words, anybody who isn't an enlightened being is a sentient being, and anybody who isn't an enlightened being is a transmigratory being. Transmigrating, I think the idea being, less, basic idea, traveling from life to life under the control of karma and the mental afflictions. But interestingly, well, I thought it was interesting anyway, it seems that when the Geshis go to the tantric colleges, the lower and upper tantric colleges, main ones, the Gyutu, Gyume, they're quite surprised to discover that migratory beings includes all sentient beings. And the reason for that is that where they've come across the idea of transmigratory beings or migratory beings, Droa, in Tibetan Droa, is in their studies of Vasubandhu's Abhidhamma Kosha. And actually, well, so anyway, there he talks about the 6 types of migratory beings, which you've heard of, right? So what do we normally say for that? I think we usually say the 6 realms. Maybe we say something like the sentient beings of the 6 realms. But actually, translating it that way, you miss one quite important point, really, which is that what the expression actually is 6 types of sentient beings. 6 types or 6 classes, it could be 6 types of sentient beings. So we know what those 6 are, right? You got the 3 for the unhappy migrations, 3 for the happy, unhappy realms, happy realms kind of thing. So 6, right? So for example, human beings, right? They're one of them, right? Human beings are one of those 6. So then what about the intermediate state beings, the bardo beings? Where do they belong? Like, for example, an intermediate state being who is going to become a human. Are they a human? They're not a human, are they? And the one who's just been a human also, they're not going to be, they're not a human either. So the intermediate state beings are not included in those 6 classes. And that's why, so that's where they get their idea of the transmigratory being. So probably a new Geshe, if you were to ask them if they mean the same thing or not, they say, no, they don't mean the same thing. And then they come across, like in many of our practices, but like, for example, in the Vajrayogini practice, Dadan Doan, like Dadan Shinjin Tamji, it says, it's very clear, they're equated. So then, big surprise. So anyway, so we know now that sentient being and transmigrating being they mean the same thing. Everybody who's one has to be the other. And also we know why some people say that they're not the same. Anyway, that's just by the way. It's probably not very interesting for you, I don't know. But sometimes I think, I don't know much, but sometimes I think maybe, a bit of a geek, because that kind of thing interests me. Finding out that kind of thing interests me. Oh, that's interesting. I see. Now I know. Anyway, so yeah, they cannot simply take away the sentient beings suffering, transmigrating beings suffering with their hands. Also, so if you think about these things, it's also quite interesting. You're like, so why would the Buddha make this point about not being able to wash away the negative karma of the sentient beings with water? Well, actually, at his time, there were people who thought that, you could go and swim in the or bathe in the Ganges, and that would get rid of all of your bad karma. So he was making a point there. I don't know about taking the suffering away with the hand, but anyway, then the next one, Nikitopa, the Buddha cannot so what you need is the realizations, right? What we need is the realizations. In other words, we need these inequalities, loving kindness, compassion, realization of emptiness, and, especially direct realization of emptiness and so on. We need all these qualities. The Buddha can't just hand them to us. He's got those qualities. He can't transfer them to us. Even though we have all these meditations where we imagine or getting all the realizations of all the Buddhas, right? Buddha said it doesn't work. So what's that all about? So that's also something to think about. That is quite interesting. So anyway, cannot actually transfer. Anyway, we know that somehow, don't we? The Buddhas can't just. If it was possible, he would have done it already, right? Whether we wanted it or not, whether we asked or not, right? Why not? But anyway, cannot do that. So then what? So then finally he says, "Chuni tempe toagyo." So how we achieve liberation is through the Buddha showing us the nature of reality, and the rest, of course, is up to us. So how does this fit in with the Four Truths? We know what the Four Truths are, right? Four Noble Truths. So anyway, maybe think about it a moment. See if you come up with an idea of which is which. So the Buddhas cannot remove, can't wash away your suffering. Your negative karma with water. Well, I mean, it's talking about the truth of suffering. So usually, when we study the Four Truths, they can be taught in different ways. Usually we hear truth of suffering, then the truth of the origin, truth of the path, and the truth of cessation, right? The effect first, which is suffering, then the cause, which is karma and mental afflictions. Then the effect, and those are the two that we don't want. Then the two we do want, the liberation, truth of cessation, so liberation from samsara, enlightenment. That's the result. And then how do you get that result? By practicing the path, which is the fourth one. So here it's the other way around. So first of all, the truth of suffering. Then he can't just take away your negative thoughts and so on. I can't remember how I said that. Sorry, other way around. The first one, because that's talking about can't take away your your negative karma. So that's the truth of the origin, right? Sorry, I got that wrong. Truth of the origin. Then the second line is about the truth of suffering. Cannot remove your suffering just by taking it away with his hand. Then the third one can't give you the realizations. That's the truth of the path. The truth of the path isn't something that can be just handed to you by the Buddha, like a present, like a boon. So how you get that, that liberation from psychic existence, endless suffering of psychic existence, is by practicing the path. And I'm getting mixed up again, aren't I? So you have to, how to get free is by practicing the path. The Buddha cannot just give you those realizations. He shows you how to achieve them by explaining emptiness, the truth of cessation, explaining that. Right. So in other words, the liberation that you want to achieve, he explains how you, the meaning of that liberation, by explaining liberation, nirvana. Then he explains emptiness, and by meditating on that and realizing that, that's how you achieve the path, which actually leads you to your own achievement of that liberation. So that path, well, in one way of looking at it, it's the path of the three higher trainings, generally. And I mean, that in the Mahayana also, nobody's going to disagree with that, but just practicing the three higher trainings, if you don't start talking about bodhicitta and so on, then that's not going to lead to anything more than your own personal liberation. So to achieve enlightenment, with that as the end goal, then we combine the realization of emptiness with the other 5 perfections, which is what we're doing now. So just the realization of emptiness doesn't lead you to enlightenment. You need the method side, as they call it, and that means generosity, the perfection of generosity, the perfection of morality, patience, joyous effort, and firm contemplation, or simply speaking, concentration, most people say. So those 5, so we're on the third of those, and of course that has to be based on the bodhicitta, which comes out of compassion, which comes out of, anyway, these various ways of meditating on bodhicitta. Right. So anyway, of those 6 perfections, we are with the perfection of patience, some call tolerance. Sometimes I feel like neither of them really quite captures it, because you have to be patient. It's like, when you're waiting in a queue, you have to be patient. I would never think of, except if I make myself think, because that's what it says in the translations in the text. I'd never think of patience being something that I need in order to overcome anger. But anyway, that's the term that we use. So, the perfection of patience or tolerance. And it's all to do with various situations that would normally make you angry. So through your understanding and through your insight, being able to avoid getting angry. And even though the best way is like what's it called? Dromtompa. Everybody's heard of Dromtompa, right? Main disciple of Lama Atisha. So some of his teachings come about or came about through the course of conversations that took place between him and Lama Atisha. So I think this one was, something that Lama Atisha asked him about how he, deals with his own mental afflictions. And what he said was that he deals with them as soon as they arise. And when he said arise, what he meant was like, as soon as there's the slightest sign of them just beginning, then he immediately applies the antidote. Of course, one thing which is really practical about that is that it's, if you can apply the antidote, there's practice patience, like in the case of anger, straight away, then you avoid them getting unmanageable. So sort of like the anger becoming arising so strongly. You only notice it when it's really arising strongly, and then you can't really do anything about it because you're just under its control. It's taken over. This is a bit like we were talking about last week. So anyway, the only way you'd be able to do that, like Drum Dumper, what he was saying is, you need to be constantly vigilant about what's going on in your mind. Yeah. Mindfulness and vigilance. Mindfulness and mindful of what? There's all sorts of things to be mindful of, isn't it? What would be, maybe the most important thing to be mindful of, in other words, to remember, in the case of trying to practice patience? Can you think? In the case of the sort of troublesome sentient beings, then remember, in other words, when we talk about not getting angry with sentient beings, then remembering that they are your mother would be very useful, wouldn't it? Kind mother and so on. Maybe in general, otherwise. I can't remember the context this comes up in. Maybe it's a general thing, but like the mental afflictions are like a wound on your body, like a very painful boil, maybe. So if you actually had that kind of boil, then you'd be mindful of it all the time. Besides the fact that the pain will probably keep drawing your attention to it, but you'd want to avoid knocking it against anything, right? You'd always want to be careful about knocking against anything because of the pain. Or if you've had frozen shoulder, and you're in a crowd, you're very careful to avoid bumping into anybody because it's agony. So you'd be very careful. So somehow a general mindfulness that you have this precious, I don't know, projects you're working on, trying to develop some very, amazing qualities, and there's all of your merit, and so this is very precious, and you want to guard it against the fire of anger, because once you get angry, then it destroys so much. So maybe particularly when you're around people, being mindful of that. Even when you're not around people, there are all sorts of other things that can cause can cause suffering, and therefore you can get angry. So maybe that kind of thing. And then, but anyway, vigilance. The more you practice vigilance, which means watching your mind, what do they call it? Like the inner spy, corner of your mind that's aware of what's going on. Then you'll be aware that anger has begun to arise. But then what does that mean? Because we know what anger, we know about, getting angry, right? When you really start yelling and it starts affecting your pulse and maybe even affecting your eyes. I don't know if anybody's got so angry that it actually changes your perception of things, literally. I've experienced that for sure. Things look very different. A bit like when when the opposite are what they talk about, rose-colored, rose-tinted glasses. So when there is a sort of like when you're in a particular kind of mood, or maybe just anyways, things looking very nice. Things actually look nice. So with anger, look when it's really full-blown anger. So then when it's not so full-blown, you could even not know that it's there because it's not something you recognize as anger. So like, for example, a little bit of a feeling of irritation. You might not think that that's anger, and it's just something that you have most of the time, maybe. It's just people are annoying, whether it's in traffic or whether it's on, walking around the shops, just, people are annoying. So just sort of like the normal level is just a sort of general level of irritation with everybody and everything kind of thing. But, it's good to be almost like you need to be particularly sensitive about how you're feeling. Not in a selfish way, but in a very sensible way, actually. You notice that there's this kind of irritation there with a particular person. First of all, a little bit of irritation. So you need to work with that while it's manageable. So anyway, I think that came up already last week, the idea that you start off with, in fact, it might be that something's coming up this week. You get used to working with the anger when it's at, well, on the one hand, problems that are small problems, working with patience, overcoming anger in relation to those, and then, being able to manage and apply the antidote to anger when it's, like not so strong, not completely taken over, that kind of thing. But then also, definitely, something we had last week was the idea that it all starts off with, anger starts off with that feeling of not liking what's happened. So if you can switch the not liking to liking, then the anger is sort of like nipped in the bud. Anyway, of course, it's not easy, but nobody said it was easy. But I know it's easy for me to say, but even though it's difficult, not trying, in other words, giving up, is even more difficult, really. Suddenly got dark and cloudy and windy.
Can I just ask, are you saying not giving up is not an option? Like giving up is not an option?
Yeah,
That,
that's what I'm
that what
saying.
you just said?
That's what I'm saying. Well, okay, I could put it in different words. What I could say is you can give up, but it's not the easy way out. You might
Mm,
feel like it's easier just not to bother because it's too hard, but actually, long term, that's the difficult.
mm.
The easier one is to just keep trying.
So it's better to say giving up is not a wise choice.
Right. Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. Okay, so anyway, we are on page 259. How to cultivate patience that is unconcerned with respect to harm. Right. Yeah, okay, let's look at this first paragraph. So this is this the first one, or did we already look at the first one? No, before was the benefits and of practicing patience and the damage that's done by anger, right? So this will be the first of the three types of patience. So how to cultivate the patience that is unconcerned with respect to harm. So when somebody harms you, this is talking about when there's a person who's harming you. If you investigate whether someone who harmed you was free not to harm you, you will find that he, or whoever it was, did not harm you while in control. They generated the desire to harm you, or in other words, the desire to harm you. I think it's useful to, in view of how the this 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 paragraph unravels, or in view of how the progress of this paragraph, I think it's better to be more literal. It doesn't say he, she, or it. It talks about the one who's harming and the harm that's been done, rather than. In other words, let me read it again, and you'll see I'm reading it slightly differently from the way it's been translated. If you investigate whether the harmer was free not to harm you, in other words, did they have any choice? You'll find that that they did not harm you while in control. The desire to harm you was generated by cause and conditions, such as the seeds of mental afflictions from previous habituation and improper attention. So here, improper attention this is like improper attention. I think the easiest way to understand this improper attention, suminjiji, yeah, so improper attention, it's maybe I could sum it up like this: the way you feel about something depends upon how you look at it. So I feel like sort of talking about it in relation to how Pabonga Dijin Jimpo explains how to do analytic meditation, checking meditation, in other words. And he says that checking meditation, so we talk about these two types of meditation, right? There's checking meditation where you're thinking about things. I mean, checking, analyzing. In so like versus the placement meditation or concentration meditation, where the analytic meditation has given you some kind of insight. It might not be insight with a capital I, but some sort of like, if you reach some kind of useful conclusion, then the concentration meditation means you just stay with that experience. You're not checking anymore, you're just staying with that experience. And so how one does the checking meditation, the way that Pabonka Dijinimpo explains it. I think you're familiar with who that is, right? Pabonka Dijinimpo. He's the one that composed, Liberation in Your Hand, which in wisdom is one big volume, and then There's another translation which is in 3 volumes. So, so he says it's like the way that attachment and anger arise. So he describes it, and I can, my teacher Gente Choka, I've heard him, talk about this several times, and it's quite interesting really, because, like for example, in the case of attachment, you meet somebody, and you're sort of attracted to them, and then you sort of think about various reasons why this person is just so desirable for you. The way they look, the way they walk, the way they talk, and so you end up with like this whole battery of reasons why this is the person for me. I could really have a happy life with this person. We can practice Dharma together and all that. So you think about these various reasons and the strength of the attachment or desire, if you like, gets stronger and stronger, and it brings you to this really strong conclusion, right? And so the checking meditation is a bit like that. Is a bit like that. Is very much like that. So it's like you look at the things from, it could be loving kindness. So you think about, or patience, like which is what we're talking about here. You think about the benefits, and so you have, in this text and in other texts, there are even more explanation about various benefits. The Bodhisattva, the Lamrim Chenmo. You think about those, so you've got like many reasons why you want to practice patience, many reasons why you don't want to practice, you don't want to get angry, and so it brings you to that kind of conclusion, and then you stay with that conclusion, and then you try to take that conclusion into your daily life with mindfulness and vigilance, so like that. And it's similar with anger, so somebody says something there and you just don't like the way they looked at you. Maybe they said something, maybe just looked at you in the wrong way. And then it's like, so you go away and you think, oh yeah, actually that's not the first time they did this before, and they did that before, and actually there's this I don't like about them and that I don't like about them, and in the future there's a good chance they're going to do this and they're going to do that, and so the anger builds because of the way that you're thinking, about it. So that's again also a bit like the checking meditation, which we need so much. So that's in both of those cases, when we talk about the thinking about the various reasons why I want this person, why I hate this person, so those are both like inappropriate attention, because you're not looking at the thing from every direction. You're just focusing on one thing. So this person, like in the wider background of past lives and so on, this person has been your mother, father, brother, sister countless times. They've given their life for you. They've sacrificed their life for you. They've sacrificed so much for you. They've helped you so much. So many different ways in which they are kind, but completely leaving out all of that. Just, very blinker, just looking at this way of looking at me that I didn't like, and so on. So that's what it's talking about. Anyway, improper attention. So it means what they have done also. This person who's harmed you, they harmed you because they had they had the seeds of mental afflictions, just like we do. We have the seeds of mental afflictions. It means as we walk around and as we're sitting here, we have the seeds of the mental afflictions. In other words, we have the potential when the conditions are there for these seeds to grow into the fully blown mental affliction, whatever it is. Like so, as we're sitting here, maybe not feeling too angry anyway. Maybe could I mean any of you, even me. We could be sitting there feeling a little bit irritated, but not completely full blown anger, right? But at any time we have the seeds for that to happen, and the reason why it's not there at the moment, why we're not, kind of like angry, is because the conditions are not there. When the conditions are there, then we get angry. So anyway, so we have the seed. They, just like us, they have the seeds of the mental afflictions. They got no choice about that. And then also the improper attention. It was because of improper attention and having those afflictions. So then something you said, something you did. It's very nice the way Shantideva goes through this in his patience chapter, and basically how he puts it is, a person doesn't choose to be angry. I mean, maybe you can just theoretically think of the possibility, but generally speaking, people don't choose to be angry. They get angry, and you might even think, they're being unreasonable. But the point is, they don't choose to get angry. People don't choose to get angry. The anger arises because we have the imprints and because of the conditions and so on. So they don't choose to get angry. And anyway, that's what he's saying here. I shouldn't just go on and on. So from previous habituation and improper attention, you get a general idea.
Venerable
Also,
Steve,
yes,
Steve, sorry
yes.
to interrupt you. I just had a question about this. Um, I think for me, like I have a lot of an easier time looking at workplace and seeing a lot of things that are, very troubling. I think at work, there's a lot of anger arising because of like layoffs at work. How are people being selected to be laid off? Or just maybe a lot of like wrongful termination of people just because, either they don't like that person, so you observe these things and you get at least I do. I sometimes get very angry because I'm like, oh, that person is excellent at their job, or that person is an excellent individual. I can't believe this happened to them. And so I think I'm sharing this because I think that I have an easier time reflecting on these seeds where you were saying like sometimes these decisions are maybe being made and we don't see all of the different conditions that result in that person being harmed. Um, and so I think that's what I'm gathering from what I'm understanding what you're trying to like share in terms of these kind of wisdom points. Um, so I'm reflecting on that and just sharing. One question that I had for you is like, do they talk a little bit about how best to wisely use meditation or um, if you're not able to be in the moment to see the boil happening, either in yourself or in others, is there another point at a later juncture to be able to like do that reflection and find that insight later? Because sometimes I think when the boil gets too big and it becomes like a big wound, like it's a lot harder to fix, so to speak. And so I think sometimes just being an inexperienced practitioner, like often these boils grow larger and like I don't really know how to like solve for that once it's like gotten too big. So to speak.
I mean, the analogy of the boil isn't, the same in every way. The main thing about the boil is that you're careful about it. You're careful to avoid knocking it. So, like that, being careful to being, it's almost, so it's like with the boil, it's like you're kind of aware not exactly of like the enemy being surrounding you, but you're surrounded by things that can cause you pain because you have that boil. So it's almost like, you're paranoid that you're surrounded by people and things and events that could um, provoke your anger, that could damage that, that those pure thing, what you call precious things that you have inside you. And so you're going to be careful to avoid, like you're going to be careful to avoid knocking your arm with the boil against this and that. So you're going to be very careful to avoid getting angry. And besides that, yeah, I think that what you were saying about, the work situation, I mean, I think that's it really. I mean, not just we're not just talking about the patients in the face of just some kind of like imaginary situation, but I mean, in a way, yeah, when you sit down and meditate, you're outside of normal um, the normal day-to-day interaction with people. Although having said that, I'm sure we've all got angry on our meditation seat before. People making a noise and so on, or even anyway. The thing is that that's when we really need to try our best. And I think that something that we were talking about last week is that we're beginners, so can't expect for too much success right from the beginning. But what is important is not to allow the irritation and the anger to fester and maybe even become worse as you mull over why it is that you really hate that person, kind of thing. So at least to be able to um, somehow heal the mind with the practice of patience when you're out of the situation, so that you're not going to be left with a constant feeling of dislike or even hatred towards this person. Anyway, some more ideas will come up, as we go through the rest. There's not a huge amount more, but I think we're not going to finish this time and then have a 1 week break and carry on with the 6 perfections and see what happens. So anyway, so let's read that paragraph through again. If you investigate whether the harmer was free not to harm you, you will find that that they did not harm you while they were in control. They didn't really. It wasn't really like anyway. While in control, their desire to harm you was generated by causes and conditions such as the seeds of the mental afflictions from previous habituation and improper attention. Also, owing to them, how did I decide to do this? Yeah, the harmful activity, the activities that inflicted harm. No, I can't remember how I decided to do that. This person engaged in activities that inflicted harm on you and thereby produced suffering in others. He engaged in activities that inflicted harm and thereby produced suffering in others. Well, that's actually pretty straightforward. So they did something harmful and therefore somebody was harmed and experienced suffering. For under the power of another, the mental fictions, he had become as if they're slaves. So the point is, what this whole paragraph is saying is, if you think about it, that person who's harmed you actually was harming you without any control because they were like the slave of their own inner, negativities. So it's a way of getting some kind of sympathy for the person rather than feeling angry with them. It's like just like something we're very familiar with. I think when somebody says something unpleasant to us or does something unpleasant, there are times when you perhaps imagine, you think maybe, or maybe you actually know that the reason that they're being like this is because they're going through a really hard time in their life at the moment. That kind of thing. So it's not really them, it's their mental afflictions. And I think actually, even though he doesn't, I don't think it mentions it in this commentary, but I think it's in the Madhyamaka or possibly in the Bodhisattva, where he talks about, whether it's Shantideva or Chandakirti, where he talks about, so when you get angry, what is it you're getting angry at? Suppose you've got somebody who's you're getting angry with them because they've beaten you with a stick, right? So would you get angry with the stick? So then you're going to say, no, of course I'm not going to get angry with the stick. Why would I get angry with the stick? I'm angry with the person who's controlling the stick. So then Chandrakirti or Shantideva says, in the same way that you don't get angry with the stick because they're controlled by the person, don't also get angry with the person because they're controlled by their mental afflictions. And that's actually a very useful thought, I think. Very useful thought. Yeah. So yeah. Then it goes on to say, I think read the rest of this and then we'll stop for a couple of minutes to think of it. So anger is also unreasonable when someone harms you under the influence of something else without control. For instance, it's also unreasonable. So why? For instance, someone possessed by an evil spirit might, under its power, wish to harm you while you are trying to help them to get rid of it. So you're the exorcist, you're getting rid of this spirit, and the person who's possessed by the spirit is, bashing you, hitting you. So the idea here is that if they were to strike you, as it says, you would not get even the slightest bit angry at him or her, and instead you would think, he's acting like this now because the evil spirit has robbed him of his freedom. You would put effort into doing whatever you could to free him from the evil spirit. So just like so a Bodhisattva should also act like that. And then in the 400 stanzas, I think it's just read these two verses. Just as a doctor is not disturbed by one who is gripped by a spirit and angry, the sage beholds the mental afflictions and not the person afflicted by them. Yeah. Master Chandrakirti also said in his commentary, there is no fault of sentient beings, it is a fault of the mental afflictions. The wise who have analysed this in detail are not disturbed by sentient beings. So, I mean, I'm not sure I completely agree that if I was an exorcist, I wouldn't get angry with somebody who's hitting me because they're possessed by a spirit. Or if I was a doctor, I'm not sure I wouldn't get angry. If somebody, was trying to hit me because some mental problem or maybe a physical problem, but it would make a difference. And maybe he's not talking about something like me becoming an exorcist. He's talking about I don't know, what is he saying? But we get the point anyway, don't we? You might get angry, but I think you would have, the more you understood that this person really has no choice, the less likely you would be to get angry. You can imagine that if you were an exorcist or a doctor, let's say a doctor, more easy to imagine in a way. So you're the doctor and the person is, being aggressive towards you because of their illness. The more you understand that this is coming from their illness, the less likely you would be to get angry. And if you were to get angry, it would be because you had forgotten that actually they have no choice. You get angry because you're taking it personally, and you've forgotten that you shouldn't take it personally because this person isn't in control. It does help anyway, doesn't it? I think it makes a difference, doesn't it? Knowing basically, I mean, the whole point he's trying to make here is when somebody harms you, there's no reason to get angry because the anger is like it's their fault, but actually it's not their fault. It's who's in control is the mental afflictions. So then, just to finish this bit off. So then, moreover, the experience of suffering produced by the one who harms you is the experience of the effect of a negative action accumulated by you yourself in the past, and the action is thereby exhausted in the sense of used up. In other words, by harming you, hitting you, or whatever, saying something unpleasant, whatever it is, they've helped you to use up your karma, which was the cause of you being harmed. And then if you cultivate patience towards it, actually towards the harm, also towards the harmer, you will not newly accumulate causes for experiencing suffering later on, whereas if you get angry, you will have to experience even greater suffering. So it's like you're experiencing this person harming you. They're harming you, that means you're experiencing suffering. That suffering comes from your own negative karma. They've helped you to use up that negative karma, so now it's finished. You won't have to experience the result of that again. And if you get angry, you'll just be creating causes for suffering more in the future, for yourself to experience suffering more in the future. It's therefore quite appropriate to bear minor suffering in order to turn away greater suffering. Like when one is patient with bloodletting, burning, and so forth as methods for curing a serious illness. People don't do the bloodletting so much these days. The burning, actually, moxibustion. Anyway, we all willingly go for our operations, right? You're not exactly looking forward to it, but you have the choice whether you're going to have the operation or not, and you say yes because you know that there's that little bit of harm. It's going to prevent a great deal of harm, loss of life and so on in the future. So maybe stop a minute or two there to think about this. So particularly, so there's three types of patience. This one is the patience that is unconcerned with respect to harm. Unconcerned, Jimmy number. So like, I think we talked about this before, somehow not so much, kind of unconcerned, like not being bothered by it. Not being bothered by it. Somebody harms you, not being bothered by it. So something I meant to say, which I forgot to say, Lisa, when you were talking about the how you feel when you see people being unfairly laid off and so on. So I mean, I'm not saying I couldn't say who's getting angry, who's getting angry, and who's not getting angry, but I do think there is a difference between anger and somehow like outrage. Anger, I mean, defining it in the way that it has been defined here in this text, in this translation, it always carries it with it the wish to harm in whatever way. Whereas I think that when you witness injustice, or maybe you're the subject of injustice, you could get angry. Of course you could get angry, but you won't necessarily get angry. There could be that feeling of outrage, which is really a strong sense of this is wrong. So I think that's quite important. Then on the other hand, there's your own sort of experience at work or wherever it might be, but then there's something most of us, I guess we all either going to read newspapers. Some people do still read newspapers. If not, then you get your news various ways on the internet, and it's, I think, something to be very careful about. I remember a long time ago, people when all there was newspapers. Then it's like when you read the newspaper, then it's read it as a lam rim teaching. That kind of idea was going around, and I think that it's easy to forget that. And when we're watching our news sources, maybe on YouTube or whatever, then it's quite easy to forget that. And so you hear about what certain people have said and done, and it's very easy for an extremely negative kind of mind to arise towards that person. I would say it's sort of like hatred. Like you despise the person, you hate them, can't stand them, and all sorts of things like that. So I really think that's also part of anger, isn't it? That's also part of anger. And so we need to practice patience also when watching the news, and realizing that something that Lama Tsongkhapa touched on a bit here when he was talking about the doctor and he didn't mention what's called exorcist, but anyway, the person who gets rid of spirits. But so it's not just not getting angry, but feeling compassion for the person. So I know, I don't want to name any names in particular, but there are people that you see on the news who've, being always in the news saying this and saying that. So remembering this person is a, mother sentient being, that helps a lot. And also, when you think about if things are the way they seem, then this person is creating so much suffering for themselves. Really. So here's your mother who's suffering. They're like the person who's been possessed. They're like the sick person with the worst sickness, which is the inner sickness of the mental afflictions. And they're creating so much suffering for others, and that's the whole point. They're creating so much suffering for others, so they are creating so much suffering for themselves. The person that they're harming, they have the possibility, although it's quite rare, to practice patience and not get caught up in the cycle of, like, so they harm me, so then so I'm going to harm them, or at least have negative thoughts towards them, creating causes for suffering. And then, if not in this life, future lives, have an experience as a result of that, or experiencing as a result of that, creating cause for more. So that's the cycle we normally get caught up in, and we do, here we do have the possibility of avoiding that, kind of getting out of that cycle. But looks like they don't have that. So they just hand over fist, creating the cause for more and more and more suffering. So anyway, yeah, not getting angry, but also feeling compassionate for the person. And I don't know if I can't remember if Lama Tsongkhapa mentions here, but something that I thought was quite effective, that something Lama Zopa used to say, and it comes from the Bodhisattva, where Shantideva says, if you think about it, this person has harmed me and I'm experiencing suffering, right? So that suffering is a result of my karma. Them harming me, that person harming me, that's the result of my karma, right? Which I created the cause for in a past life. If I hadn't created that karma, then that person wouldn't be able to harm me. They can only harm me because I created the karma for it to happen. So actually, I started it. So it's a way of thinking that helps you to overcome anger, right? Because you can argue about this. Well, you say, well, no, actually they started, because of course, But anyway, that's not very helpful. What's really helpful is, so I created that karma, and now I'm just experiencing the result of that. And so they couldn't harm me if I hadn't created that karma. That means that they wouldn't have been able to create the cause for more suffering for themselves by harming me if I hadn't created the cause to be harmed, right? So it's because I created the karma that this person is now creating the karma to experience so much suffering in the future. So that's all down to me. And so what Shantideva says, and this is obviously something that Lama Zopa, Khyaltsen Rinpoche, thought was very useful for his students to think about, is so as a result of the harm that they've done, the karma they've created by harming me, they are going to go to the lower realms in the future life. And Shantideva says, so didn't I throw them there? Didn't I put them there? Wasn't it me that made them go there? So it's worth thinking about this. I can't guarantee that thinking that way is going to be effective for everybody, because I got a feeling that sometimes putting the blame on oneself, maybe if you're the kind of person who blames yourself for everything anyway, maybe it's just going to make you feel worse. I mean, it's a fact that the Dharma is like medicine, and even the best medicine isn't necessarily something that everybody should take. So, for example, I've got a very good medicine for blood pressure, right? But that's been prescribed for me, and just because it's a very effective medicine doesn't mean say I should hand it out to my friends because it's a really good medicine. It's got to be appropriate to the illness and to the person, hasn't it? So just like that, the Buddha's teachings, they're like medicine, and different medicines for different illnesses, different people. Like in the 8 verses, what does it say? Well, anyway, in the 8 verses, I can't remember exactly which verse, but there is a sort of theme there, which is that, well, anyway, certainly in the Bodhisattva, Shantideva expresses the prayer to be the earth that sentient beings tread on, and somehow there is one verse where he talks about giving the victory, taking the blame. So in other words, like accepting the blame for everything. I'm the one to blame. Let them have the victory. And for some people who've already maybe whose biggest problem maybe is that they feel like they've been used like a doormat all their life, and so then it just makes them feel even more like a doormat. So maybe it doesn't work for them to think that way. See what I mean? But anyway, I think it's very useful. Okay, so then it's nearly past, and so you've got a week off, and then next time we've got another 6 classes, so we'll be able to finish off the 6 perfections, and then after the 6 perfections, you've got the 4 means of attracting sentient beings, gathering sentient beings towards you. Quite a lot on the wisdom. Yeah, so anyway, then after that we have calm abiding and special insight. We have to think about that a bit. So everybody okay? Good. So anyway, maybe we can do some dedication, please. I'm just checking. Okay, good. I think that's all right. Oh, lots of messages. I think I missed most of them. Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Okay, yeah, okay. So Lisa and Lindsay and Aaron answered that one. That's good. Anyway, if you didn't get a chance to ask something that you put in the chat, I just had a quick look, and maybe I didn't look at them carefully enough. But well, looks like everybody that had questions was able to ask. So maybe we can finish there. May the precious supreme bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline but increase more and more. Due to the past, present and future merits collected by me and all the merits of the 3 times collected by numberless Buddhas and numberless sentient beings, may bodhicitta be generated in the hearts of all the sentient beings of the 6 realms, and especially in the hearts of everybody in this world, including all the students, benefactors, and volunteers in the FPMT organization. May it be generated in the hearts of all those who rely upon me, all those for whom I have promised to pray, and all those whose names have been given to me. May it be generated in my heart and in the hearts of all my family members, those who are living and those who have died. May the bodhicitta that's already been generated increase. I think it's nice also to... Something the Lama Zopa used to do also very nice is, to pray especially for everybody who's in a position of power in the lives of others, mainly, like, like presidents and prime ministers and kings and queens of different places in the world, and religious leaders. I think also, anyway, anybody who has power over the lives of others, for them to, if they don't already have bodhicitta, to generate bodhicitta, and for their bodhicitta to keep growing and never diminish. I don't know how much making that kind of prayer helps them to generate bodhicitta, but I think it builds up some kind of like something very wholesome and really quite rich and powerful in one's own mind. It sort of like strengthens this aspiration to be able to, guide sentient beings towards such, such qualities. Because when you're making these dedication prayers, then you're thinking how amazing that would be, right? It's all part of that prayer, isn't it? And how amazing. So it's like an aspiration. And aspiration, is what gets you everywhere. It's the aspiration for enlightenment that gets you to enlightenment, right? Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. May you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. I will dedicate all these virtues, the virtues past, present, and future of oneself and others, to be able to train just like the hero Manjushri, who knows reality, and just like Samantabhadra as well. I fully dedicate all my roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best by all the gone beyond victorious ones of the 3 times in order to have good conduct. Due to this virtue, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transmigratory beings without exception to that state. Due to the past, present and future merits collected by me, the numberless Buddhas and the numberless sentient beings which are completely empty of existing from their own side, may I, who am completely empty of existing from my own side, achieve the state of full enlightenment which is completely empty of existing from its own side, and lead all sentient beings who are completely empty of existing from their own side to that state which is completely empty of existing from its own side. By myself alone, who am completely empty of existing from my own side. As long as any sentient being has not been liberated from samsara, may I abide in samsara to help them, even though I achieve highest enlightenment. By merely seeing, hearing, thinking about, or remembering me, as well as by touching me or talking to me, may all sentient beings be pacified, and may there be happiness forever. Yeah, it's gone half past, so let's dedicate more briefly, dedicate for the quick return and success in every way of the new incarnation of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, for everything to work out perfectly for him and also the other tulkus who have not yet been found, or even those that have been found, for everything to go well in their life so they can continue guiding us, guiding sentient beings in various ways like before. Yeah, I think that's it. So also please dedicate for the success of the FMT and especially of Land of Medicine Buddha. And Brian and Shana, or no? Oh, you had your hand up. Okay, so see you in a couple of weeks, I hope.